Hello, I am one of your eCourse psychology professors, and I have the privilege of introducing you not only to your first Fireside chat, but also to Lesson 1. Lesson 1 and the first chapter you'll be reading is going to give you little tidbits of everything that is to come in the course. I thought it was interesting that in the very beginning of the chapter, the introduction reminds us whether we're talking about Clive Waring or we're talking about James Wannerton or The Beautiful Mind of John Nash, that ultimately we're talking about the brain and the nervous system. We are our brains, and the psychology of being human is related to how our brains function, how our brains develop, and how our brains can change over the course of our lifetime, either through injury, disease, or aging. And we want to keep that in mind, if you will, as we travel throughout the course. In the second slide here, I have information about Wilhelm Wundt. And Wundt is notable for starting the first experimental lab of psychology. Sigmund Freud is usually accredited to the father of psychology, of clinical psychology, and Wilhelm Wundt, really the developer of laboratory sciences. He decided, I think he kind of said, hey, how come everybody else on campus has a lab, the chemists and the physicists? What about people interested in psychology? So he convinced his institution to give him laboratory space, to bring in subjects, and to collect data, which drove all of psychology from that lab. I mentioned Freud. You all have heard of Freud, whether you've read Freud or you've heard things about Freud, you're not sure about them. You'll get a good introduction to Freud in this class, and really all of clinical psychology would not exist unless somebody else invented it, except for the work of Sigmund Freud, the idea of talk therapy. Another branch of psychology that you'll learn in the course is behaviorism. Some of the names there are B.F. Skinner, and you've probably heard of Pavlov. But these behaviorists were interested in not what Freud was looking, or even Wundt were looking at about internal experiences, but rather the behaviors that were performed by humans, dogs, animals, especially animals, because you can have them live in a lab and perform experiments with them to either increase their behaviors, change, or decrease their behaviors using certain, rewards or punishments. The influence of Skinner, of course, is immense. A lot of parents use reinforcements without perhaps even knowing it all came out of that behavioral movement led by B.F. Skinner at Harvard University. Another key figure or branch of psychology is with the humanists. Humanists took different tracks. One, the pyramid here, the famous Maslow's hierarchy of needs, says that we have to move from our most basic physiological needs on up. We can't skip layers of the pyramid, but rather have to work our way up, filling ourselves with food, water, safety, friendship, belonging, esteem needs before we could have inner fulfillment or self-actualization. Carl Rogers, another humanist, developed a form of psychotherapy and taught us about the role of empathy and compassion and self and other understanding when trying to reach a more fulfilling life. Another branch of psychology is a focus on biopsychology, looking primarily, again, about the brain and the nervous system. Here we have a split between the central and the peripheral nervous system. They work as one fluid entity with each other to rev up our nervous system when we need to protect ourselves, let's say, and to bring our system back to homeostasis in order that we don't utilize too many of our resources within our body, and that we can restore ourselves again. Another branch of psychology is developmental psychology, or lifespan. And here we have Jean Piaget. Piaget taught us about children and the way that children learn and that they develop in stages. Another branch of psychology is social psychology. You'll learn about a lot of really famous experiments in social psychology. Here you see the ad. This was an ad that was by Stanley Milgram at Yale University, trying to bring subjects in to do his famous study where the subjects were asked to push buttons to administer what they thought were real electrical shocks in the other room. You'll learn more about that study during your lessons. And finally, we want to talk about the field of psychology. What is a psychologist? What is a psychiatrist? What is a counselor? What are the trainings that everybody undergoes, and where do we work? So welcome to the world of psychology, and welcome to your eCore class. We're so happy that you're here.